Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Howling by Linekraft. This is a brand new full-length album by one of the biggest names in the Japanese power electronic scene at the moment, Linekraft. For me, my introduction to the artist was with the album Subhuman Principle back in 2019, which I find it to be an excellent album and in my opinion one of the most essential and one of the greatest releases when it comes to power electronics in recent years. Since that point I've been following his catalog and listening to some of the new stuff that he has put out, but not really something that would manage to reach that certain level of quality. Some of the latest works after Subhuman Principle have been kinda hit or miss for me, so I didn't really know what to expect out of Howling, but I can say that at least the sound we get with this brand new album is pretty familiar. Linekraft has a really nice way of fusing power electronics with death industrial alongside with many different other sounds and approaches, a lot of samples and a quite ridiculous use of effects on the vocals, which is also something that is present right here, and it makes for moments where the vocals can be really distracting in the sense that there is so much manipulation and effects to them that it sort of comes out of nowhere and makes the experience pretty bizarre. But in my opinion, for the most part it works in a really good way. It's still a pretty standard approach when it comes to power electronics vocals, but Linekraft has a unique way on approaching them, just making them even more ridiculous than what you would expect, with like a real big use of flanger or phaser, whatever the effect is, which certainly gives a pretty interesting touch to the vocals to say the least. This is something that we get with the very first track, Walk a Long Line, which is a sound that is pretty familiar with what you're used to in terms of Linekraft. Like when the album started with this track, it felt like a signature sound, something that I'm familiar with and something that is also really well executed. Linekraft over here does an amazing job on creating such a dark and dreadful atmosphere with monotone ambient passages, but also combining that with so many different industrial soundscapes and samples, which makes the overall experience sound pretty chaotic. So for me it makes for a really nice combination of moods, with one side being really dark and atmospheric and other elements making the track sound quite aggressive. And for me it makes for a really nice blend of sounds and a really great way to kick things off with this album. But after this point it takes a slight nosedive with the next two songs, which in my opinion drag this album down a little bit, and I was worried that the experience overall might not be as much compelling, because the track The Wicked King Wicker, while it has some okay elements to it when it comes to the dark atmosphere and the ambience, it felt quite distracting after a certain point with the use of those samples which are like these revolver gun shots that you would get in like a city old Wild West film, and it makes for a big distraction and something that I didn't really like that much because it just makes the experience really goofy. It came out of nowhere and it just sort of ruined the mood, and it was like constant at times. It was overwhelming, so I couldn't really take this track that much seriously at parts. And then the track Shall Become Devilish Homicide is kinda interesting, but I'd say it's pretty lackluster, and it also has this constant high frequency sound which, while it adds character to the song, I'd say it gets a bit irritating at times because it has sort of the same tone to it for almost the entirety of the song, and it gets it to so many parts, and I believe that it could have been toned down a little bit because it takes a big portion of the song and it sort of covers many aspects that I find to be much more interesting in terms of the sound choices. But then we get into some really, and I mean really strong moments into this album. We get the track Ugh, which despite its really funny and silly title, it's an excellent song, and it's the one track where we see a different approach and one that goes into some more melodic parts, which I find it to be done in a spectacular way over here. They create a different mood and a different atmosphere that it is dark, but it's also kinda melancholic. There is like a kinda sad tone to those melodies, which comes in great contrast with the vocals, which once again over here sound pretty ridiculous, but in my opinion it makes for a really great combination of sounds and one that just sounds weirdly cohesive, and I find the overall experience to be extremely captivating and definitely one of the standout moments in this album. Then there's the track Cloven, which in my opinion is absolutely spectacular and an amazing power electronic song, one that starts on a pretty disturbing note with those dog barks, and then we get this heavily distorted monotone bass which carries throughout the rest of the song, and it makes for such a gritty and aggressive experience. And I like all of the other sounds being combined over here, from the use of the vocals and the effects to the rest of the additional portions with some junk industrial sounds, and also this amazing haunting pattern which comes into certain places throughout the mix. It makes for such a great addition to the song. The overall use of sounds over here is spectacular, and for me this is an amazing song, definitely one of the greatest tracks I've heard in power electronics in recent memory. This right here is how you make a spectacular death industrial and power electronic song. And I would also say kind of the same thing with the next track, I Blame God. Another excellent moment over here, one that is way more minimal and one that focuses on just one certain ambient tone, but all of the surrounding elements throughout this track are also really well done. But for me the greatest thing about this song has to be the vocals, as they have this really distinct tone to them, just repeating themselves, and I like how there is a certain pattern, something that you can easily memorize and something that carries throughout the entirety of the song. It is one of my favorite aspects when it comes to power electronics, and those repeated vocal parts aligned with the rest of the instrumentation makes for an excellent moment overall. The track Howling sounds pretty decent and it has a really nice dark atmosphere to it. Not necessarily one of my favorite moments, but I'd say that it's one of the better ones when it comes to the more minimal industrial beat portions, which sound kinda cool over here in comparison to like tracks 2 and 3, which was also one of my least favorite aspects about those particular songs, mainly because when it came to those more industrial minimal beat portions, they felt more of like a distraction in the way they were buried into the mix and not really making for such great additions throughout the song. In my opinion, I feel that they would work much better if they would just be pure ambience, but in terms of Howling I'd say that there is a bit of a better work done over here and it makes for a pretty decent song. Finally, we have the track Lone Wolf, which is definitely the most minimal moment over here, one that I would say is kinda lackluster. I personally prefer the more chaotic and adventurous side of Linekraft with like the use of multiple samples and other industrial soundscapes, but I'd say that overall it makes for a kinda okay finisher since I really like the atmosphere, and I think that just for how dark and haunting it sounds, it actually makes for a kinda decent way to end this album. Now this project over here is a little inconsistent since there were tracks that I didn't really care for whatsoever, but on the other hand I'd say that this one contains some of the greatest and some of the most exceptional power electronics and death industrial stuff I've heard in recent memory. This is a really great album and in my opinion it's really worth giving it a shot. Some of the moments here are fantastic and make for some of my favorite power electronics tracks, period. When it wants to, it's a really well crafted album, and even if you don't find this one of the most consistent experience, the highlights over here are top notch and I definitely do recommend you to give this one a shot. I'm gonna give Howling an 8 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why? And what do you want to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.